Defense budget suffers setback. Foreign Affairs Ministry breach appropriation laws. And later on the program.
You know, the law of Nigeria says you can't spend a penny of Nigeria money until it is appropriated. So yet they have been spending those money without appropriation.
We'll hear from Chairman House Committee on Foreign Affairs, Honorable Buba Yusuf. You're watching the Hello Chambers on TVC News. I am Tijesu Adeoye. The Senate has suspended consideration of the Ministry of Defense budget over what they say is the minister's refusal to honor several invitations to talk about the resuscitation of the Nigerian Navy ship, NNS Aradu. Now the minister is stranded and would need to further engage with the lawmakers and profusely lobby before his ministry's budget will be considered.
It's important to the nation, not even to their budget. That ship is bigger than their budget. Very competitive. Not the minister of defense, not to the minister of the budget of army or naval budget. That's one military budget. So it's not as big, but it's equally important. But that ship.
The Minister of Foreign Affairs, Geoffrey Oyema, is under fire from lawmakers for allegedly breaching the appropriation law. The lawmakers did not give him a chance to defend the budget, but the minister denies the allegations.
We sent another letter to the missions directly, since the ministry have asked them not to comply to the directive of the National Assembly to obey the law of the land. The ministry sent another letter on the 16th of June, signed by Ambassador Janet, that they should not adhere to those laws. And then it was at that point, Mr. Speaker invited you and your team, and then we showed you these communications, which you said this letter did not get to you. But your PAM sent the first letter, and then a day after, Ambassador Janet sent a second letter specifically directing the embassies not to obey the appropriation, section 10 of the Appropriation Act. And then recently, on the 6th of September 2022, I also sent a letter to the office of the minister that reminding you that the Amendment Appropriation Act has been assented to by Mr. President, and this is it.
I think that at no point is the ministry deliberately trying to place itself above any law. As regards the Appropriation Act that you mentioned, we have sent out notices to all the missions as to how to set up the tenders board and to carry out their tenders themselves. We felt, however, that it was appropriate for at least the ministry to give some guidance to them as to how to proceed in doing so. And we have seen the challenges that they are facing now because of that. Because a number of the ambassadors in a number of missions are being summoned by EFCC to come and explain a number of expenses that they have incurred. And I think this is partly because they are not fully aware of how to proceed. But in any case, we have given the directives, I've signed off on it, that they can set up, as you said, Mr. President has assented to it. So we have no problems. We're not flouting it in any way. And I have certainly never sent or signed anything to any mission to tell them to disregard those requirements.
Nigeria's plans to end open defecation nationwide by the year 2025 may have encountered a setback as the Senate has ordered a halt to the construction of public toilets going on in some parts of the Federal Capital Territory. The directory was issued by the chairman of the Senate's FCT committee, Smart Adeyemi, at the FCT's budget defense session at the National Assembly. Senator Smart criticized the project for falling short of international standards and going against the FCT's master plan.
They are constructing toilets. And you know what? These toilets, they are not going to be linked with the sewage system. They now dug holes. So in the afternoon, when there's heat, the thing will be blowing and be polluting the air.
The water is going to the groundwater.
And there's no water there. So the question is, how were they able to just decide to be constructing toilets everywhere without somebody guiding them? Before, when we were here in 2011 to 15, in the night, social development, they go around and arrest people. Now, nothing's happening. What's the problem with FCT? There are night markets, you see people cooking on the street, you see firewood, you see people selling suya along the road, where criminals will go and hide and pretend they are eating, and sit with them. So what we're going to do, we're going to create time. Like I told you, it's not how long you stay in the place that matters, it's how well. For the period that remains, we want them to know that we here are committed. We want Abuja to come back to its track.
Minister of Defense Bashir Magashi says the federal government is investigating the source of the advisory issued by the government that caused unnecessary panic in the federal capital. The House of Reps Committee on Defense also asked relevant questions about the security situation in the country.
The armed forces of Nigeria should take note of the recent security alert in Nigeria by the U.S. government. We urge you to effectively collaborate with sister security agencies to ensure that all security threats are completely neutralized and Nigerians can live peacefully. Let me conclude by reiterating the 9th House of Reps' continued resolve to ensure a peaceful, secure, and prosperous country for all Nigerians. Therefore, as we consider the 2023 budget, please note that this committee will do our best to ensure that adequate fund is allocated to the defense sector, but within the limits of available resources and priorities.
We were able to subject the details to our intelligence organizations, and they have provided answers to those areas which the government is in doubt. And we realize that all we need is to be extra vigilant to prevent any activity of the bandits, or where the threat is likely to be able to have enough forces that can neutralize those kind of situations.
Thank you for staying with us. You're still watching the Hallowed Chambers, and my guest today is an honorable member in the House of Representatives representing Gombe Hong in Adamawa State Federal Constituency, and he is also the chairman of the House Committee on Foreign Affairs in the 9th National Assembly. His name is Honorable Buba Yusuf. It's good to have you on the program, sir.
Thank you, you're welcome.
So we understand that the National Assembly lawmakers are currently meeting with heads of ministries, departments, and agencies for 2 weeks now to defend their budgets. Can you tell us so far, what has it been like?
Well, as you have said, this is the period for agencies, ministries, and parastatals to come before the National Assembly to defend their budgets. One, the National Assembly is empowered by the Constitution to make laws and also to oversight these agencies of government to make sure that they keep or abide by the law. The money law, which is the appropriation of funds to these agencies by the National Assembly, is done annually. And before we pass a new budget, the agency or ministry have to tell us what they have done with the previous budget to make sure the monies are judiciously utilized for the good of Nigerians. And so the House Committee on Foreign Affairs was in session yesterday to receive the Minister of Foreign Affairs with his team and also other agencies and parastatals under the ministry.
And we understand that in his appearance, your committee rejected his budget. Can you tell us why that happened?
Yeah, just as like I said, our constitutional duty is to make sure that monies appropriated in the previous budget are utilized judiciously. But we found out that there are some infractions in the previous budgets, and so we have asked them to go and correct those infractions. One of those infractions is in the past, the missions or embassies all over the world, we have over 110, have to come back to the headquarters in Nigeria whenever they want to use their capital component of the budget to get approval. And the bottleneck is so much because they have to write, and then the headquarters will send officers to the missions. They will pay escorts, they will pay air tickets, and when they go there, they will accommodate them and so on. And sometimes when they come back, the approval never comes. So you will find some of these embassies having capital components of their budget for 5 years. Some of them applying for approvals for up to 5-7 years, they won't get. So that is why, if you are following the trends about what is happening with our missions all over the world, it has become disgraceful. You will find an ambassador's house leaking, deteriorated, no vehicles. Sometimes the vehicles break down in transit with our flag flying on it. And so the committee, in its wisdom, in 2022, came up with a new law in the Appropriation Act. And Mr. President graciously assented to the law. And what the law did was to empower the missions to be able to form their own tenders board and spend their capitals within a specific threshold, just like the other agencies, boards and parastatals, and executes the project of maintaining the properties of Nigeria out there, and then maybe their vehicles and so on. So the ministry refused to obey that law. They came back with a proposal for the law to be repealed. It wasn't. It was sent back during the budget amendment, and Mr. President assented to it again. And yet they refused to obey that law. We have written the ministry like 4 times. They refused. The Speaker of the House of Representatives invited the minister and his team to ask why they don't want to obey the law. Yet, whenever we write either the ministry or write the embassies to adhere to that law, there is always a counter letter through telex from the ministry headquarters to say that law should not be obeyed. That was why yesterday we picked them on that, and the minister said he wasn't aware. We brought out the telexes from the ministry that were communicated to these missions, and those letters, telex, were signed by either the permanent secretary or some senior directors in the ministry, and they did not argue it. So the second law that they have refused to obey is the issue where you have monies in the capital account of the missions for up to 5 years, 7 years. You know, and the law says that after every fiscal year, any money that is left in an account should be returned back to the federation account. Where that should not, that is not done, the agency or organization should write back to the National Assembly to seek for waiver. We have reminded the ministry to do that so that they will be spending those funds in line with the law. Several times they refuse to seek for waiver from the National Assembly, and they kept breaking that law. And thirdly, the other law that the ministry refused to adhere to is that the embassies were given approval by Mr. President to collect administrative charges from issuance of visas. And those administrative charges are supposed to help them to renovate their houses and also take care of some administrative issues. But you know, the law of Nigeria says you can't spend a penny of Nigerian money until it is appropriated. So yet they have been spending those money without appropriation. The committee have been writing the minister to do a budget of what they are expected to raise from those revenues generated internally and bring it to the National Assembly for appropriation. They refuse to. And so that means those monies are spent without appropriation. So these are the three major areas that we queried and asked the ministry to go back and correct those infractions before they will come back for their budget defense and presentation of the 2023 budget for all necessary approvals.
But from the defense put up by the minister by way of documents, perhaps if they are not able to meet up with the ultimatum, or I don't know if you've given them any form of ultimatum, is there any existing ultimatum? Because we understand that if their budget is not approved, that means there is no budget for them in 2023.
Yes, I think they will not joke with that because one, refusing to obey the law is an offense that is punishable by the law of Nigeria. So if you are queried and you are advised to do the right thing, and maybe because of your personal interest, you are refusing to obey the law, I want to assure you that nobody, no Nigerian or any organization or any ministry or agency that is bigger than the law of Nigeria. So no individual can be bigger than the laws of Nigeria. So if they abide by the queries we have given them, fine. If they don't, the law will take its course.
So aside budget sessions like this, what else is your committee doing, and also the parliament in its entirety? What is the House doing to check extra budgetary spendings by these government ministries, departments, and agencies?
Yes, that is one of our major duties, to oversight. We just came back from oversighting some of the missions just last week. Despite the fact that there are no funds, we and some members of my committee volunteered to sponsor ourselves to visit some of the missions so that we will see things for ourselves. So when we oversight, we look at their books and we see what is really going on. It is because of this very important function of oversight that we discovered that it is not well with our embassies all over the world.
So we understand that the minister has submitted some documents to you to prove in his defense. Have your committee looked through those documents?
Yes, you know, when we asked the minister to tell us why they just deliberately don't want to obey the laws, in these three instances. One is the issue of Section 10 of the Appropriation Act. This is the Appropriation Act. This is how it is. And Section 10 of the Appropriation Act says the missions and embassies shall constitute their tender board as in a parastatal standards board within the requisite threshold in compliance with the extant executive circular and the provisions of the Public Procurement Act. So this is what the law says. And this is the 2022 Appropriation Act as amended. And on the 18th of January, I wrote a letter to the minister reminding him to say, Minister, there is a law that you are not abiding with. Please write the missions and the embassies to make sure that these laws are obeyed. They abandoned the letter. They did not write the missions, and they did not reply us. And I wrote another letter on the 23rd. After reporting to Mr. Speaker, the director we should write the missions directly informing them about these infractions of the going against the provisions of the law. We wrote, and instead of getting a reply, the next day the ministry wrote a letter to the missions asking them not to comply with that law, that they are not comfortable with that law and they want the law repealed, so they are working on it. And they refused to. They wrote them. And then we now invited them, the speaker invited them. The night the speaker invited them, they wrote another letter asking the missions not to adhere to our letters, that they must seek for approval from the ministry and contradiction of the law. And then I also wrote them another letter still in January about the other law. This where they have monies in their capital for more than 2, 3, 4, 5 years, and then that they should write the National Assembly to get waivers, because that is what the law says. If you don't return those monies to the Federation account, you have to get waiver from the National Assembly, which they ignored. They did not reply. And after that, recently in September, before the budget session, I wrote them again, reminding the minister that you are still not adhering to the law, because we have gone out to the embassies and things are still in bad shape, and you have some embassies that have monies in their capital account, and yet they cannot repair leaking roofs and damaged fences and other things in their embassy, because you have refused to obey the law. They always send telex to the embassies warning them not to adhere to the law. And this letter was received, you can see, acknowledged in September. So we have been putting them on several notice. And then the other aspect of the law, which we said they should adhere to, is this document they presented yesterday, which is not a complete document, where I wrote them in September. This letter I wrote in September to ask them to furnish us with monies that are in those amount of monies in the capital account, so that we can process and give them a waiver, so the embassies can utilize those funds. So that is the document they brought yesterday, which they've started using. They started the process, but they did not complete it, and they never communicated us. They never replied our letters until when we invited them, and they brought this document. But the two other infractions, because this one is not even complete, the two other infractions where they were asked to inform the embassies to start adhering to Section 10 of the Appropriation Act, they never brought any evidence to show us that they have communicated the embassies.
All right, let's talk politics. The court nullified the primary election of your governorship candidate in Adamawa State. This means that the APC may not be on the ballot in the 2023 general elections. How do you react to this?
No, I don't believe that, because this is just the first stage of the court, the high court level. The case is still in the appeal court, and we still have the third level, which is the Supreme Court. So I am sure the party will participate.
And how is it looking? Does the future seem bright for the presidential candidate?
You mean the APC presidential candidate? Yes. Well, we don't have any strong competitor against the APC presidential candidate. If you do your political calculations very well, you will see that we don't have any major opposition as it is right now.
Okay, assuming, what role would this case play in other elective positions?
Not at all, not at all. I am sure the appeal court, because there is a timeline for all pre-election cases. Just yesterday, I have seen that the judiciary have formed a special committee to make sure all these cases are done within the shortest possible time, as required by the Electoral Act. So I'm sure all these cases will soon be over, and the APC will definitely be on the ballot as per the gubernatorial election in Adamawa State.